Welcome to the Dental Decoders podcast. I'm your host, Brittany Rogars, and I'm here to help you crack the code on all things dental operations. Each week, we dive into topics to help you overcome roadblocks, streamline operations, and reduce team burnout. Whether you're an owner, a practice manager, or a team member, this podcast is for you. Join us for insightful discussions, engaging interviews, and practical tips. So sit back and relax as we crack the code on all things dental operations together. Good morning, Decoders. Good afternoon, good evening, whenever you're listening. Good that. Welcome to this week's episode of the Dental Decoders podcast. I am your host, Brittany Rogars, and today I have another fantastic episode for you. This one I am super excited about because I have been fangirling over this guest for a long time. He is an absolutely incredible person, and in addition to being an incredible person, he also has just a brilliant mind and is one of the GOATs in the industry when it comes to insurance and coding. As an insurance and coding nerd, I have been following this man for a long time, so I'm really excited to be able to have him on the show. Without further ado, let's introduce Dr. Gregg Grobmyer. Dr. Gregg is currently the chief editor of Dr. Charles Blair's Dental Coding with Confidence book, which, if you aren't using, strongly recommend you go check that out. It is one of the absolutely mandatory tools for anyone who is working in a dental practice, if I do say so myself. So Dr. Gregg has practiced clinical dentistry in Tennessee for over a decade before chemotherapy from a cancer battle left him with numb fingers. He was able to use the knowledge derived from working with multiple practice consultants over the years and began lecturing and coaching offices nationwide on their systems, culture, marketing, and communications. In addition, he also wrote regularly on topics for numerous publications and websites. Outside of the dental industry, Dr. Gregg has also been featured in big names like Reader's Digest, New York Magazine, Men's Health, and so many more. He also, fun fact, spent a few years moonlighting as a stand-up comic, which I found incredibly interesting, and we do talk about a little bit in this episode. As I mentioned, he's currently the chief editor for Dr. Charles Blair's annually updated Coding with Confidence book and Practice Boosters Insurance Solutions newsletter, a contributing editor to the Dental Administration with Confidence and Dental Documentation with Confidence books, and a course creator, a lecturer, and so much more. He is a wealth of knowledge, and I am just so excited to be able to have him on the show and share his expertise with you. Before we dig into the episode, I do want to talk about this week's sponsor. We are going to be sponsored by SKF Practice Solutions, which is an open dental consulting agency. They work with offices who use open dental software and offer training and consultations to help offices work smarter, not harder. They are offering a great deal for all of our listeners. So if you are using Open Dental, you definitely want to take advantage of this offer, which is 20% off of their comprehensive software exam, which is a 100-point checklist that digs into the way you are using your database and talks about ways you can implement small changes to make a big impact. So feel free to use code Dental Decoders at checkout to get your hands on that 20% off of the Open Dental Software Comprehensive Exam. Without further ado, let's dig into this week's episode with Dr. Gregg. Hello, Gregg. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Dental Decoders. I'm so happy to have you here.
I'm so glad to be here. This is a great honor for me. I did Dental Decoders, and then what I do with all the dental coding, it fit. It was as soon as I saw the name of your podcast, I was like, I want to be on that.
I thought the same. I was like, we can't do this show without you. So I'm glad we got you on.
That's fantastic.
So, Gregg, for people who maybe have not had the opportunity to meet you yet, can you tell me just a little bit about yourself and your background?
Sure, absolutely. I was a clinically practicing dentist in West Tennessee. I went through a cancer battle. I was only 36. I was 36 years old and I went in talking to the doctor about acid reflux, found out I was anemic. And so obviously something was wrong. They pushed me forward, eventually figured out, they pressed me towards a colonoscopy, and lo and behold, they found a mass. And the day I got diagnosed, I woke up from that and they said, hey man, we found this thing. It needs to come out. We have a surgeon standing by. Would you like to do it today? And so I just literally got put back under and had the whole right side of my guts taken out. And so that experience was traumatic enough, but I ended up the chemotherapy. I was working for a week, and then I would do chemo for a week, and then I would work in dentistry for a week, and I would do chemo for a week. And eventually it caught up with me. It was a platinum containing drug. It left me with peripheral neuropathy. I've got numb fingers and numb feet. I couldn't do the clinical parts of things anymore. So I had to step out of clinical practice. Now, luckily, I was in a group practice, and they took over from me and kind of bought out the portion I was in. And so then I had to transition. I had to figure out something else to do. I had spent a decade as a client of various coaching companies. And so I'd kind of gotten all the dental practice management coaching stuff from the client side from that perspective. And so it was real easy for me to transition into that. So that's where I started. I started doing practice management coaching and consulting. I had a franchise of kind of a national firm. And so it was part of this big organization. And I enjoyed it, but I had a friend, another colleague who was interested in my territory because it was franchised, and they ended up kind of buying me out of that. And I got strictly into industry writing, which has always been a passion of mine. I've always been, even when I was in clinical practice, I was writing for like our local newspapers and our magazines and things, trying to promote our practice. I already had this little stockpile of writing, kind of put it up on the internet as a portfolio, and promoted myself as the writing dentist for a long time. So I got to write for Reader's Digest, and I got to write for the trade mags and all the clinical stuff, and all that was great and fun, and writing for websites. But getting to write for New York Magazine and Men's Health and stuff like that, that was a lot of fun. I enjoyed doing that. That led me to Dr. Charles Blair. Probably most people know who he is if you've been in dentistry for any length of time. He's the elder statesman of dental insurance. He was the guru, he was the goat. And so I was sitting in a Kroger parking lot one day when I got the phone call and talked to Dr. Blair on the phone. He was looking for someone to take over the Insurance Solutions newsletter, which was a product that he had been running for a long time. And so stepped into that role, and it gradually progressed as he kind of was aging out, getting a little more behind the scenes. I started stepping in. So began doing his public speaking, began doing his consulting calls and his, working one-on-one with practices across the nation, and also writing the coding book. And so Dental Coding with Confidence is the gold standard, if you will, of dental coding. There's, the products that the ADA puts out, which are awesome and absolutely love them, but we kind of expand upon it. We talk more about the insurance side of things and what an attachment should be and what a narrative should be and what's the difference between this code and that code. So we go into a lot more explanation of just not only what the codes are, but how to use them. And everything is backed by what ADA says. I'm on the phone or I'm emailing, I'm trying to get, the nuance of, you used this word. Did you mean this or did you mean this? And so we get to build a bridge between the CDT code set and the dental practices. And even the insurers, the payers, they're looking at our book. They're looking at that kind of stuff. Every claims adjuster I've ever talked to has a copy of this book laying on their desk that they're looking stuff up to kind of make sure it's meeting all these little criteria. And it's got all these, bits and pieces there to it. And so we rewrite and update this thing every single year. And so, not from scratch, heaven forbid, but it was, we got 870 some odd codes now. And so, in every year there's new ones, and every year they're taking some out. And so that affects all of them. Every time a code is mentioned here, it's probably referenced in 10 other places. And so we've got to go through and change it all. So it's a big project that we work on, and that takes pretty much my whole summer. I'm out speaking usually in the spring and in the fall. And then during the summer session, I'm sitting here at this desk and just banging away on the keyboard all day long. And so trying to holler at the kids to keep it down. So, that's my life, and that's how I got to where I am, all thanks to Dr. Charles Blair and Penny Reed, who I got to do a shout out to. If you know Penny, she was my first practice management coach when I was in dental practice, way back when. And as she stepped out and transitioned, she was interim CEO of Practice Booster for a little while, working with Charles Blair. And it's she that brought my name up to him. And so I kind of owe this all to her. So got a shout out to Penny. If you know her, you love
Penny.
her. Yeah. She's awesome. She's awesome.
there's so many facets to that story that I have a hard time even figuring out where to dive in next. I want to ask you a million questions. So,
Please do.
one of the things that I just want to share with you that I took away is you referred to Dr. Charles Blair as GOAT, and I have you in my calendar as interview with the GOAT. So I just want to
What?
make sure that you are aware that you
Oh.
are in those same ranks.
Oh
So
my gosh. I have huge shoes to fill and some coattails that I've been hanging on to and riding like crazy, but I'm doing my best. I'm doing my best. And, and I'm getting good feedback so far. So let's knock on
knock
wood.
on wood.
I've been
Yeah.
doing this for, about 5 years now. And I don't know that there's replacing Dr. Blair. I'm not trying to replace Dr. Blair,
Hmm.
but I'm definitely trying to continue his legacy. Absolutely.
Well, I think you are doing a great job, and I think all of the ways that you are bringing to the table for us to get this information and have it be digestible is just so beneficial. We share the book with everybody that works inside my business, and they all read that. But having the podcast and like quick and convenient ways to get that same type of information has been just such a game changer, especially as the newer age is coming into dentistry and we're training people who are younger and maybe don't want to sit down and dig through the book all the time.
That's
So,
right. And just to clarify, I mean, we've got the book, but we've also got online resources and we've got one-on-one coaching and we've got all these other things. We do have the podcast. That's the Dental Code Advisor podcast. And so both of us being podcast geeks and hosts, I love being able to talk to other people who do this too and then kind of,
mhm.
feed off of each other. It's awesome, but we're really trying to update things and bring things a little more into the new age for younger generation too. The books are still always going to be around. Everybody just likes a physical copy sometimes,
Mhm.
but the same information is on our database on the website. We've got an ebook format version of it too. And so, I mean, it's all there, and it's not just the coding, it's the administration, and there's documentation, and there's things on technology, and we've got a lot of different resources. Medical dental cross coding is a book that's like this thick. But if you've ever seen that one, it's a doorstop of a book with all the ICD-10 cross codes and everything and how to do medical billing. That's huge. That's the future. I think we're heading towards that. And
Mhm.
so incorporating more and more of that into dentistry. But right now, our focus, our bread and butter is absolutely the CDT.
I love medical billing and coding. That's become kind of my new hyperfixation that I'm
Yeah.
learning more about because the codes are just tripped and fell off of a chair, tripped it
So
like there's for
weird.
everything they have a
I
code. I
know
just can't even
they do
imagine.
all the different trauma codes. There's literally,
Uh-huh.
got bitten by a dog while doing. I mean, it's so specific. It's so
Uh-huh.
crazy. If you read the full ICD-10 set, it's strange. And so,
It's a scary language. I'll stick with my CDT codes for right now,
absolutely,
that's for
I
sure.
think dentistry right now. I mean, we've got it simplified. It's a
Hmm.
little, even though it may be complex to a lot of people, our system's a lot easier than the medical system is. Now we all, we know we're going to be incorporating some of that going forward. All of CDT, current dental terminology, it's all procedural coding, and so everything that's got a D whatever number is a procedure that we're performing. It doesn't say why we're doing it, doesn't say what we're using, doesn't say what steps we took. It's just what is the procedure. And so it's kind of a simple way of doing things compared to medical. Medical focuses on why. And so they start off with the ICD-10 codes, which are diagnostic codes. And then there's CPT codes, and then there's all these HCPCS codes, which are all these what did you use to do it kind of things. And so it's complex. We've got people that do that. I do dental, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
I've got like this working knowledge of medical that's like this big. So I can speak to it, but I am not the expert on medical.
Anyone who is has a very special set of skills because that's a whole
Absolutely.
other
Absolutely. They do.
language. So, with you being clinically out of the game or not in a practice any longer, what are some ways that you're able to stay up to date on all of these changes in coding and the way things are used inside of practices and keep your finger on the pulse, being that you're not in a practice anymore?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, as far as the coding part of it goes, every year I attend the CMC, which is the Code Maintenance Committee meeting. It's up at the ADA's headquarters every March, and that's the discussion of what the new codes are going to be for the following year. And so they're looking at the code change submissions, the potential code changes that are coming, and then they get to vote on those. Now, those potential code changes come from anybody. Anybody that wants to submit a potential code change can. It's on ADA's website. They've got a link there, a form that you fill out. As long as you get that done by sometime in November, I can't remember the date, but it's sometime in November, then they look at those the following March, and they're going to vote yes or no, or tweak them, or let's change this word, let's change this verbiage, we like the way this is or not. And so then they make those changes. And so that's in March. About end of May here, beginning of June, somewhere we're going to get kind of the definitive final, this was what all the lists were and the verbiage we settled on kind of things. And then I get thrown into the fire rewriting the books. So that's the whole, how do I stay on top of the CDT code set thing? And because I'm constantly communicating with the source, which is the Code Maintenance Committee. And the Code Maintenance Committee is not just ADA. There's 5 members from ADA that are on there, but there are 24 voting members altogether. So there's 19 of them are not associated with ADA. There's reps from AGD. There's reps from all 12 dental specialties have representation there. And then there's some payers there too. Blue Cross is there. Delta Dental is there. Okay. They're voting on what these codes are. But we, as the dentists, kind of outweigh the dental payers. We can usually get codes pushed through if it's something that we feel is something that we would like to have as a code. That doesn't mean the payers are going to pay it. That's a whole different conversation. Yep. And so we're kind of working with them too. But as far as staying on the pulse of the changes and updates in dentistry itself, I'm constantly looking at, social media. I'm working with particular companies. Actually, we do a lot behind the scenes of working with individual manufacturers to make sure that their products, we create a coding resource for them, that they may push out to their clients. And so it'll be a walkthrough, you can use it for this and this, and here's how you code it, and here's how you bill it. And so we'll create these resources and these one sheets that they might include in some of their products. So I actually get to see a lot of the products and a lot of the things before it's publicly known, before there's any advertising, before there's anything. So that's fun too, because I get to work some of that into my lectures, and I can talk about what's coming down the pike, which is a lot of fun.
That is so cool. I always wondered because they always, whenever you're in an office and they bring you a new product, they're like, well, here's how you use it, but here's also how you can maybe get paid for it and code it out and use it. And I always wondered where that came from.
That's a big part of the conversation. And a lot of times that ball is dropped. They'll say, here's this fancy new toy, but they won't tell you how to use it or how to monetize it. How do you bill it? How do you code for it? What all documentation needs to be there? What does the narrative need to say? All those things are critically important. Every single code, as I'm writing the book, I'm really, really digging into the language. It's almost like being an attorney. I'm having to kind of figure out, pick through exactly what everything means and what applies and what doesn't. What most dental offices are looking at, they're looking at the code, the number itself, like D0120 or whatever, and then they're looking at the nomenclature, which is just one sentence. It's probably 4 words to maybe 8 words long. Underneath that, what they don't see is this entire descriptor, this whole other box of text that's not only laying out kind of a little more precisely what that code means, but also criteria that have to be met in order to properly code that code. And so if you're not meeting these little hidden criteria in that little extra paragraph, then you could get in trouble. If you've got the situation where you're using this code and you're submitting it to insurances, heaven forbid you're ever audited. But if they come in and you're not reporting one of the things that's written in the little description there, they can take money back because you're not properly delivering the code. And even if you are actually doing it in your office, but not writing it down, not putting it in the clinical documentation, it didn't happen. And so from a legal point of view, that's where we want to help protect offices that way. From an audit standpoint, from a board standpoint, we want to make sure that everything is being done kind of by the book to maximize reimbursement and to just protect yourself, to make sure that you're able to hang on to the dollars that you are creating in the office because you've documented things correctly. And heaven forbid there's a lawsuit 5 years down the road. You're not going to remember what happened today. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So clinical documentation is a huge thing that we're really pushing, really teaching. Nobody does it enough. Honestly,
Mm-hmm.
nobody writes I'm sure there are some, but for the most part, nobody writes thorough enough chart notes that really have everything in there that need to be there. And nothing in the clinical chart or nothing in the clinical narrative should be from anywhere but the clinical chart notes.
Yes.
And so it's up to the clinicians, it's up to the people in the back to get all that stuff correct, to know
Mm-hmm.
what to put in there to begin with, so that the people, the admin team, can do their job. And so it's so critically important. A lot of times now they're asking for screenshots too of just
Mm-hmm.
what are the notes of the data service. They're not even wanting you to write a narrative.
Exactly.
And
That's
so
one of the like hot topic things that we do, or like the hot take things that we do, is revenue cycle management is not a front of the house task. It is a
it's
full
not.
team. And it always seems like offices come and they want help when they've gotten to that point where I've had a few offices that I've had to work with who are getting audited by Delta Dental or some insurance carrier,
Fact.
not to name names.
That's not the best
Exactly.
time to do it. After
No,
the
it is
fact is
not.
not the best time to do it.
Exactly. So I love that you bring that up and really speak to the fact that it is a full team operation to manage your revenue cycle, to
It
keep you
absolutely is. I'll be
compliant,
at
to
I'll be at
protect your
trade
license.
shows. Just recently I was at Hinman and working
Hmm.
a table down there, and as we're calling out to doctors and getting them to try to look at our books and things, they're all like, "Oh, I've got somebody that does that. Oh, my front desk does that. That's not me. That's somebody else." And really missing the boat. This is a super cheap entry point that has enormous return on investment without seeing any additional patients, without
Hmm.
doing any additional work. You're actually beginning to get to keep more of the money that you're making. You're making sure that your revenue is maximized through those reimbursements. You're not having so many delays and denials on getting cash back. You're not having to worry about audits. As if it does happen, you're protected. You've got the right stuff. You know what needs to be there. Okay.
Hmm.
And so all that counts as dollars. And so making sure that that's being done correctly, and strategic coding. I work with practices across the nation. I do what we call revenue enhancement seminars. These are 3 hour sit down just like this with me over Zoom, and I will go through a practice's coding. And so I'll look at, okay, you did this, you did this, you did this one so many times, and here's what you need to know about this code, and here's what you need to know about this one. But a lot of it is, here's a code you're not using, and if you just started using this one instead of that one, it's way more reimbursement. It's a higher fee. It's better for the patient. It's more accurate. And so just those little steps and integrating all these new codes, the new code changes are there to allow for dentists to be able to code and for bill and report certain things that weren't there in the past. And so being able to do that correctly, you always have to code for what you do and be accurate and truthful in what you're saying. It's got to match your documentation. But oftentimes there's more than one code that fits a particular situation, and you want to pick the one that's going to have the best result for the patient and for your office. And so knowing how to do that, spending that 3 hours where I sit down and go through, I'm always finding deleted codes that are still being submitted. Well, automatic denial. That's just not going to fly. Little bits and pieces that aren't being documented that could really get people into trouble. There's certain steps you have to take. And so, you were just talking about the podcast. I just did one on D0180 and
Hmm.
4346. Those two by themselves, they're hugely underused in dentistry, and they have huge upside. You've got a ton of patients that would qualify for those particular codes. And if you know how to code it and you know how to report it and you know the proper documentation that needs to go with it, you can get them paid. And because of that, I mean, that's just changing a number, and suddenly your revenue went way up,
Hmm.
just changing a number on the chart. And it's so simple, and just you need to know how to learn how to do it.
Exactly.
That's all it is.
And most of the time, the offices are already 4346 and 0180 are great examples. They're already doing the things. They're just
Mhm.
miscoding it in the front end. So you don't really have to change anything except for properly coding it. So it's
That's
not
right.
even a huge change of your in-office protocol to improve in those areas, which I think is just crazy.
Absolutely. As long as everything's getting documented correctly,
Exactly. Yes.
the pictures are intraoral photos are getting taken when they need to get taken. And,
Mm-hmm.
the proper language is there. There's keywords. We're dealing in the world of AI now. We've got computers that are scanning everything. We've got them digging through chart notes. We've got them looking at radiographs. Over half of payers are now using some form of AI within their business practice to look at radiographs. And
Mm-hmm.
so, I mean, for years, we've had them scanning claims and just looking at claim language and just to see if all the parts and pieces are there. Auto adjudication is what it's called. It's just automatically, if you submit a prophy and the patient has prophy benefits, it probably doesn't see a human. It just gets paid. And that takes a big job off of the industry there, off the insurers. But when it comes down to a clinical claims reviewer having to make decisions about does this meet the criteria or not, that's something that's a worth a conversation right there. Just because it fits the code and it's valid and it's the proper treatment and you diagnosed it correctly and you've done everything doesn't mean it meets the payer's criteria.
Exactly.
They've got this little book. They've got this thing called the plan document, and there's some clown up in an office somewhere who has written down, "Hey, I want my employees to get this and this and this, but only if they meet these certain criteria. We're not going to pay on perio unless the pocket is 5 millimeters deep or more. Well, 4 millimeters, that's still bone loss.
Mm-hmm.
But it may not meet that criteria to actually get paid. And so you've got to know these things. And you got to know the rules of the game you're playing. Got to be able to get a hold of plan documents and know how to get that. Got to know what type of insurance plan it is. Is it self-funded or fully insured? That's the
Mm-hmm.
thing. Most dentist office, they've got a half and half mix in their office more than likely, and they don't even know what those terms mean.
Exactly.
And so there's so much to learn here just about how to strategically play the game, and so that you win. And it's hard to play without knowing the rules.
100%. I'm an insurance nerd a little bit. I will just self identify as such. So that's the type of stuff that I really love learning about and getting to know. When you were practicing and you were clinically still in the chair, were these the types of things that crossed your mind?
No. Insurance was my least favorite part of practicing
Mm-hmm.
dentistry. And now here I am doing it all day. But life takes you where it takes you. You never know. So I found my little niche and my little area of expertise. But this was not what I had set out to do. If you'd asked me when I was 12 what I wanted to be when I grew up, a insurance coding book writer would not be the thing I would have told you. So
Well, that's surprising. I think every 12-year-old wants to
wants
be
to
an
be a
insurance
insurance
coding book
coding nerd.
writer.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I want to ask you, when you sent over your bio, one of the things that stood out to me most, and I was like, oh, that I didn't see coming. You do some stand up comedy.
I
I want to ask
did.
you about that a little.
I won't say I do stand aside from driving my own family insane, but being funny on Facebook. That's about as far as it goes these days. But yeah, I had a time period there where after I got out of clinical practice and I had gone through this tremendous diagnosis and cancer and was coming off of that. I was a skinny little dude at the time, just from the chemo, lost like 30, 40 pounds. Also went through a divorce at the same time,
Hmm.
right during my cancer. And so everything I knew in life, just the carpet got pulled out from under, and I had to completely reinvent myself from the ground up. And so part of that was I decided to take on any challenges that kind of were laid before me. And so I wanted to do the things that had scared me. Anything that was something that I was nervous about, I knew that was an opportunity for growth. Okay. And so again, was just being funny on Facebook, had one of my friends opt for this amateur comedy hour that was a little local thing. And so I was like, yeah, sure, I'll do that. So I'd never done that before. So I wrote about a, 10-minute little deal and I got up and performed it. And I performed about cancer and divorce. and all these horrible things. And I took it and I spun it and I made it mine. And that gave me power over it. It was therapy. And so after my one little set, there happened to be a kind of talent scout guy who was in the audience listening to all this, caught me after the show and said, "Hey, would you like to actually start doing this for real?" And again, that was nothing I'd ever considered. And so I began opening for local acts, the headliners as they came through. I've toured a little bit, going to just, not too far off. This was never a paying gig that I was like going to make a lifestyle out of, but this was a little fun thing that I moonlighted and had a little free therapy at night, just speaking my mind. And hopefully all the YouTube videos have been scrubbed from existence. So at this point in time.
Challenge accepted. I will be finding those later. So having that sense of humor and that ability to take the struggles that you were facing and turn those into something that you can make light of, do you think that that skill has been helpful for you just from a communication perspective, being a speaker, being a writer, being a coach?
I talk to people about insurance starting at 8 a.m. and have them sit in a lecture hall listening to me talk for 3-4 hours at a time. And I literally just did a 8-hour webinar about a month or two ago, sitting in this chair for 8 hours, just talking insurance stuff, talking coding. If it wasn't for my ability to kind of like be a little engaging, be a little entertaining, everybody would be asleep. There would not be anyone in the house that was still able to be conscious. So it's a topic that's dry enough. I have to infuse some humor into it. I have to put some life into it, because otherwise nobody's going to pay attention. And so you learn when you're engaged. You learn when you have energy and there's some skin in the game. I'm teaching people how to make more money or work better, more efficiently, do things the right way, and scare them a little bit. I'm talking about, the bad things that can happen. Then I talk about the good things that can happen. So keeping people engaged is what I like to do. I score myself when I get up and speak and do a live speaking event by just how many eyes continue on me throughout the entire process of, 2, 3, 4 hours of me talking about this. Are they still engaged? And then when I get a line at the end of the show of people coming up asking questions, I know I've done okay. And it's a good feeling.
I do the opposite when I do public speaking. I look anywhere but in people's eyes. I get still super nervous. So that's going to be my challenge for myself to
Well,
get on
it
my
was the
comfort
stand
zone.
up. Once you've done that, this other is easy. Getting up talking about dental stuff, I've had hecklers, like real live,
Ooh.
people call me out. And so that after doing that, this seems like a no-brainer to me. I mean, I started off in like theater and doing stuff even through high school and college and all that. So it was always kind of in my wheelhouse, writing and performance. And so then you threw the dentistry in the mix, and now I've got this weird little skill set that kind of works for what I do, and so it's a perfect job for me. And so I'm glad to be able to share it with everybody else.
Well, catch me on a stand-up tour next. That's going to be my next thing then. So I want to be respectful of your time, Doc, and I don't want to take up too much of it, but I have 2 more questions that I want to ask you. First is for people who are looking to connect with you and they want to learn more about what you do. I'll put all the links in the show notes, but where can they find you?
PracticeBooster.com. There it is. So PracticeBooster.com, that's Dr. Charles Blair's brainchild, his company. And so we're all available right there. The store's got our books and things. Our consulting has a tab for itself where I can work with, go through your UCR fees and reset your fees, or talk about, coding and actually do a review of your coding with your team and train your team on a Zoom call just like this. And so it's a one-off thing. It's not like an ongoing deal where I'm, holding your hand like a practice management consultant would be. This is kind of just this one team training. But we do have call center support. You get a year of call center support. You sign up for these different online resources, and you can literally email the support system there, and I'll answer you with, why is this EOB weird? Or how do I code for this strange procedure? And so that's what I do. I mean, during the day, I'm like writing, and at night, I'm answering questions. I'm banging out emails, responding to dentists across the nation about this strange thing that I'm having to figure out how to code for. How do I do it right? And so we've got a team. It's not just me. There's, I kind of do the coding parts of it. We've got some experts on admin. We've got experts on medical. And so we're working on payer side. We're working on dental side. We work a lot with the ADA. We're trying to be the hub in the wheel and connect everybody so that everybody's communicating correctly and doing what needs to be done to do things the right way. But practicebooster.com, that was the whole come back to that.
Perfect. That's such a valuable resource, and I can't wait for our listeners to be able to take advantage of some of those things, because I think it's just such a powerful tool that there's not really a lot of offices out there who couldn't benefit in some way, shape, or form from.
Absolutely. I've found very few, if any, that are doing everything correct. It's just not there.
So as we wrap this episode, we always end with one final question, which is, what is the secret code or your decoding moment that has helped you be successful in your life and your career?
I think I touched on it earlier, which was go and do the thing that you're scared of doing. And so step out of that comfort zone. I think it's, every time we go to the gym and we're exercising, we're tearing muscle fibers and they grow back stronger. Life is the same way. Face that fear, do that thing. If you're not outside of your comfort zone, then there is no growth. There is no change. And so I keep saying yes to things before I'm prepared to actually do them. And that's gotten me pretty far so far.
I just literally yesterday put up an Instagram post about the same thing. So I love that was your answer, because it resonates a lot with me. So
also spoons and forks.
Spoons and forks, huh?
That's spoons and forks. Brittany. That was
the way I hate spoons.
Yeah, that was an interesting fact that the truth bomb you dropped on Facebook the other day there.
It is. It's a real problem. I'm working on it.
Okay.
I'm glad that's the one thing people always seem to know about me. You're the girl that hates spoons.
You hate spoons. There you go.
Okay. All right, Doc, thank you so much for joining us. This has been such a valuable conversation. I appreciate your time so much. Thank you so much for joining us for this week's episode of Dental Decoders podcast. We hope you took away a valuable piece of information. As always, don't forget to rate, share, and subscribe to help us build our community of dental decoders. We look forward to seeing you for next week's episode.